What's up, Ocean? You got Matt here, and today I'm bringing you a guide on how to use Paldea Tauros in competitive Pokemon. We're going to talk about the Fire Tauros, the Water Tauros, and of course, the standard Paldea Tauros. So if you're excited for the video, then do me a favor and leave a like on the video to help us reach our like goal of 75 likes. Make sure to comment your thoughts on Paldea Tauros down in the comments below, as well as make sure to subscribe to the channel as well to help us reach our goal right now of 4,000 subscribers. Let's go ahead and jump on into it. So like I said in the intro, we're going to cover each of the different forms for this Pokemon. We're going to talk about the Fire, the Water, and the Fighting form. And as always, we start off with these Pokemon's stats. Its stats are pretty well rounded. They all share the same stat distribution, which is going to be 75 HP, 110 attack, 105 defense, 30 special attack, 70 special defense, and 100 speed for a total of 490, which is really good overall. I kind of wish that it kept the same 110 that the Cantonian Tauros had, but at the end of the day, the speed stat being 100 is still above average for this metagame. Right now, this Pokemon has a couple of different types. We're going to start off with the pure fighting type, which has weaknesses to flying, fairy, and psychic, with resistances to rock, bug, and dark. It has some usefulness offensively, though, in the format right now because there are so many good dark types that are around, so it does have a lot going for it. On the other hand, there is the Water and Fighting Tauros, which has weaknesses to flying, grass, electric, psychic, and fairy, so more weaknesses than the pure fighting. However, it has quite a few more resistances. It resists rock, bug, steel, fire, dark, water, and ice. A lot of defensive types there, which are really nice. As for the fire version of this, it has weaknesses to flying, ground, water, and psychic, with resistances to steel, fire, grass, ice, dark, and bug. So again, a lot of really key types that you're resisting with this Pokemon, and I like this a lot on a Pokemon like Paldea Tauros, especially with the base speed and the attack stat that it has. It does have three pretty solid abilities, starting off with one of the best abilities in the entire game being Intimidate. The fact that on switching you can lower the attack of all of your opponent's Pokemon by one stage is incredibly valuable, and we've been talking about getting a special Intimidate since the abilities became a mechanic in Generation 3. It also has access to Anger Point, which has some usefulness if the Urshifu Single Strike is in the format, because this Pokemon does resist the Wicked Blow, and that always crits, and then you can boost your attacks and max it out at the highest it could possibly be. And the way this works is, even if you're at -6, you get a boost all the way to +6. It is a +12 in attack if you get crit, which is not that consistent unless you're going specifically against like an Urshifu Rapid Strike, or not Rapid Strike, but Single Strike. Rapid Strike depending on if you're going to be something like the Water Tauros, because you resist the certain strikes. You also have access to Cudchew, which is a new ability in this generation. Essentially what it does is if this Pokemon eats a berry, the next turn, at the end of the next turn, it will consume that berry once more. So it's really good specifically with an item like the Citrus Berry. Now let's talk about some of the move pools, and the way I'm going to break this down, I'm going to start by talking about the moves that this Pokemon gets in all three forms, and then I'm going to break down to each of the individual different forms. Now, for notable moves, starting off with all forms, we have Raging Bull, which essentially is a 90 base power attack that breaks screens, so super valuable, and its type changes depending on what form this Pokemon has. So if it's a fighting type, it'll be fighting type. If it is a fire type, it'll be fire, and if it's a water type, it'll be water. And that's really valuable. It also has access to Close Combat, which is a much more powerful option. It has Earthquake, which is really good, one of the most common and powerful moves in the game. It has Iron Head to deal with fairy types, Outrage, which is really strong in the certain situations that you might be in, Rock Slide for doubles, while Stone Edge for singles is really nice. You have access to Trailblaze to boost your speed by one stage, Wild Charge, which does recoil, but it hits opposing water types. Zen Headbutt can be really powerful against other fighting type Pokemon, and of course, Bulk Up is really solid. Now, all these moves I mentioned are moves that all three forms get access to, which is really nice. But as for the water form gets access to Wave Crash, which is a 120 base power water type Flare Blitz, so super valuable on this Pokemon, as well as access to Aqua Jet, so it gets priority, which is incredibly valuable. The fire one though gets access to Flare Blitz as well as Flame Charge to boost its speed instead of Trailblaze, and it also has access to Will-O-Wisp, which has a lot of good utility on the defensive side, which is awesome. Now let's talk about some teammates to pair with the Paldea Tauros, and the way I'm going to break this down is I'm going to go with 2 for each of the different types, so 2 water, 2 fire, 2 fighting, and I'm going to go for 2 that cover all three. And that's how I'm going to start. So starting off of this, I just want to mention that Paldea Tauros will rarely be the star of the show. It's always going to be breaking for something else because, spoiler, it is not the best Pokemon out there, but it does have some utility for what it can do. So keep that in mind when I go over the Pokemon to pair with it. We're going to start off with the Water Paldean form, and we're going to start with Pelipper. Pelipper makes a lot of sense with Paldea Tauros because it has the ability to boost the Wave Crashes, the Aqua Jets, and of course the Raging Bulls if you are the Water Paldea Tauros, which is really nice. Then we have access to Goldengo. Tauros can break through the fires, the grounds, and the darks for Goldengo, while it also forces in the Ghost type Pokemon for it, and maybe if you hit it with a rain boosted or a not even rain boosted water type attack, it can do a lot of damage. And on the other hand, Goldengo can take on the fairies, flyings, and psychics and grasses for the Water Tauros. As for the Fire Tauros, we're looking at something like Meowscarada. These cover a lot of each other's weaknesses and checks, which is fantastic. They also have a really good speed combination, with Tauros being base 100 and Meowscarada being like, what, base 123-ish, around that range. So it is very strong nonetheless. Then there's Iron Valiant, mostly because the double fighting type core here is really good in competitive Pokemon nowadays with all the Ruin Pokemon going around, and they're really good offensive and defensive Pokemon that are weak to fighting. So having double fighting is really strong. They also have a great speed tier, and they can help beat each other's checks like, well, Goldengo, which is one of the best checks to Iron Valiant. Then for the fighting type, the pure type, we're going to start off with Skeledirge. This Pokemon pairs so well with so many different Pokemon because it's such a good defensive pivot, has a great typing, has access to amazing moves. The fact that Skeledirge can handle a lot of the Pokemon that would normally check the regular Paldea Tauros is super valuable. We then have Iron Treads here because it has great speed and momentum, of course, which we love. It also beats down the Fairies, the Psychics, and the Flyings for the regular Paldea Tauros. Now for some Pokemon that are going to pair well with all three forms, and starting off with Baxcalibur, which is seeing a lot of play right now in VGC. The reason I'm mentioning Baxcalibur specifically is because it's an amazing hard-hitting wall breaker that can break through a lot of different Pokemon in the format, especially when you pair it with Glaive Rush and the Protect combination. Glaive Rush will have basically a weakness where you're going to be taking double damage and all moves will hit you the next turn, but if you Protect through that, you're in a really good spot. Now that forces some mind games for your opponent. Are they really going to click Protect or not? Should I target the other Pokemon? And Tauros can help take advantage of that. And it also gets access to Intimidate to weaken those physical attacks that will come the way of the Baxcalibur. Then I also wanted to mention Clodsire, especially for singles. It's one of the best hazard setters in the game, and it also resists many types that the Tauroses are weak to, including, well, it's immune to water, it's immune to electric, and it resists fairy, which is super valuable in a format like this. Now let's take a look at some of the best Terra types for these Pokemon. I'm going to start off by talking about Paldean Water Tauros, and honestly, the best ones for me is going to be Water. This Pokemon is such an amazing, hard-hitting Pokemon, especially in rain, so you really want to be able to take advantage of that. So running Water Terra to boost your wave crashes even further is extremely valuable. I then think that fighting makes a lot of sense too to boost up the close combats. I think it's a really strong option here. And then a secondary option, I say, or a tertiary option in this case, would be Fairy. Fairy is going to be a common trend on all these different Pokemon because it's a really good type. It's the best type in the game overall, and it still hits really, really hard. As for the Fire type, I think Fairy is the best type. By far, Fairy should be the best type. And then second would be Fire, just to boost up your powerful Raging Bulls or your Flare Blitz. They can be really powerful depending on the situation. As for the fighting type scenario, I think that Fairy is again the best type available on Paldea Tauros for the regular fighting type version, and I think that Dark is a decent option, so you can help take on opposing Ghost type Pokemon. You have some utility, but I really think that Fairy is going to be seeing more play than Dark. I just want to give you a second option, other than just say, go Fairy, and that's it. Now let's talk about some of the best items to carry on a Paldea Tauros. Now all three of these can take advantage of basically every single option. Here, I think that the best one is going to be the Life Orb. It's a fantastic item to have access to. You're a really good offensive Pokemon, 100 base speed, 110 base attack. You're gonna hit really hard, especially with your powerful offensive moves. Access to close combat, Flare Blitz, Wave Crash, all 120 base power, and stab boosted, so it's really difficult to take it on, especially with the Life Orb boost. I then think that the Leftovers makes a lot of sense on more bulky sets, which could work especially on the Fire version of this Pokemon. The Citrus Berry works extremely well, but mostly if you're going to be running Cudshoe or if it's going to be a doubles matchup. But in doubles, Assault Vest is even better. AV on this Pokemon is really nice to handle basically the physical and the special threats in the metagame because you have the Intimidate, you have decent physical bulk. Your special bulk is fine, but having the AV on it really boosts it up to the point where you're able to take many hits and fire off really powerful coverage options that you have access to with this Pokemon. Now let's talk about some Paldea Tauros movesets that you can use the next time you run this Pokemon. I'm going to cover two sets for each of the different Tauros forms. Starting off with the Water form, we're looking at the Assault Vest set with Terra Fairy here, Intimidate, of course. We're running 204 HP, 60 attack, and then 244 speed with a Jolly Nature. We're rocking Raging Bull, Close Combat, Aqua Jet, and Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb could be replaced with Rock Slide, but in general, it's a really powerful option to have on this Pokemon. We then have a Life Orb set here, which is just max speed, max attack with Wave Crash this time. And instead of running the Rock Tomb or the Rock Slide, we're running Stone Edge. This is better off in singles. In my mind, we have Aqua Jet as well for priority. Then for the Fire set, we start off with one that is 128 speed with an Adamant Nature, which is enough speed for Goldengo, a modest Goldengo at that. We are Terra type Fairy once again with Raging Bull, Body Press, Will-O-Wisp, and Bulk Up. The rest was shoved into our HP and our special defense. It's more of a set that spreads the Will-O-Wisp around and then is able to bulk up and hit things really hard with the Raging Bull and Body Presses overall. Then we have a Life Orb set also on the Fire version of this Pokemon. Intimidate once again, Terra type Fire this time though, max attack, max speed, Close Combat, Raging Bull, Rock Slide, and Protect. I can see the set being run in doubles quite often because it is a very powerful offensive Pokemon, and we know how good Fire is in VGC right now. We then have a Fighting type. The Fighting type form we're looking at is going to be starting off with a Citrus Berry set. I want to run at least one Cudchew variant to show you guys. We're looking at Wild Charge, Close Combat, Earthquake, and Stone Edge, and Fighting as our Terra type here. Max speed, max attack, just able to punish things as much as possible. Recover back some HP with the Citrus Berry twice because of Cudchew. It could have a lot of usefulness. And then we have a Choice Scar variant here, which is going to be Terra Water, but we're running Terra Blast this time to hit the Water type attacks, which is super valuable. Close Combat with Edgequake coverage. Earthquake and Stone Edge are super important. Now, the last thing we do is talk about some predictions we have for the metagame for these Pokemon. Now, obviously, the metagame has developed quite a bit since I've last been on the channel here, and I wanted to point out where I think this will end up going over time. So starting off with Smogon, we cover Smogon, VGC, and Draft League, so let's go ahead and talk about each of the different forms. So starting off with Smogon and the Fire Paldea Tauros, we're looking at RU. And it currently isn't RU. I just think that in general, there are better Fires and Fighting types available, so it'll always stick around in the RU tier. I can't see it going below that because it's really powerful, has great stats, great typing, and a great ability. Then for the Water form, I believe it'll end up in the RU tier as well, but it is currently in UU. I think as the game goes on, we're going to eventually see it drop in usage. It's seeing a lot of play right now. A lot of people are using it because they see a lot of other people use it, but in general, I think that it's not as good as people expect it to be, and it will fall down in usage and go to RU. And then for the regular Fighting type version, I think it'll end up in the NU tier. Raging Bull not changing its type is not great, but in general, I think that having access to this Pokemon here is really strong and can break effectively in given the right circumstances, but it'll be in the NU tier. Now for VGC, starting off with the Fire form, I don't think it's the worst form available in VGC, but it's far from being the best form in my mind. While Fire is a good typing in VGC, right now it does struggle a little bit because you have to deal with Pokemon like Dondozo and Garchomp, which are all very scary in the current format. As for Water, this is a really good anti-meta pick to have in the format because it's able to deal with Pokemon like something like Baxcalibur with your Fighting type stab, like the Kingambit with the same deal, Mousehold as well, and of course Skeledirge, which are powerful Water type attacks. So it has a lot more usefulness as a Water type than as a Fire type. And as for the Fighting type Pokemon, this thing will see almost no play. It is really not good in VGC. I think there are just so many better options. You're going to run basically any of the other Fighting types available in the format over a Paldea Tauros. Now for Draft League, this is my specialty. If you guys want to see more Draft League videos, then make sure to subscribe to the channel as well. Now, first thing I want to point out is never to clump these Pokemon together. Always make it so there are 3 separate Pokemon. If you make it so that you pick up one Pokemon and it's going to cover all 3 of these different Pokemon, it's a mistake in my opinion. So we're going to start off with the Fighting type. I believe the Fighting type will end up in the 4 to 5 point tier. It is the worst in my mind. It has great typing as a breaker, as a pure Fighting type, but in general, it's just Tauros with a new skin. And that's fine on everything, but Tauros in Draft League was never going to be more than a 5-point Pokemon, and that was because it was fast and had an immunity to Ghost, which always has value. This thing here, I think, is going to be slightly lower than a regular Tauros in my mind. As for the Water type, I think it's going to end up being in the 6 to 7 point tier. Yeah, it has utility as a Water type, it has utility as an Intimidate Pokemon. It's got solid speed, it's a great Terra Captain. I just think there's better options for Fighting types available, and because of that, it'll fall down the ranks until it gets used in the 6 or 7 point tier. And finally, for the Fire type, it'll end up in the 5 to 6 point tier. It's a solid low tier Fire, it's a solid low tier Fighting, another great Terra Captain, but in general, I think it's just worse than Water, and I think it's better than normal, or not normal, Fighting, so I should put up a little bit higher than that. And that's all I've got for you guys today on the Paldea Tauros forums. If you guys enjoyed this video, then do me a favor and leave a like on the video to help us reach our like goal of 75 likes. Make sure to comment your thoughts on Paldea Tauros down in the comments below. Which is your favorite? I would love to hear from you guys. And of course, let me know which Pokemon you want to see me cover next. Of course, subscribe to the channel as well. We're on the road to 4,000 subscribers, and we can't get there without your help. I want to give a big thank you to our YouTube channel members as well. Their support is greatly appreciated. So shout out to our level 1s, which are going to be Liv, Eric, Zeke, Texas Man. Our level 2 is Tone, and our level 3 is Sully. Thank you all for the support, and thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you all next time.